Mesdames et messieurs, nous voici donc
Ladies and gentlemen, we are back for the last exchanges of today. So I'd like to thank you once again for being with us today. I'd also like to thank all the people who followed the meeting remotely. So thanks for joining us again now. One last piece of information before we get to the closing ceremony. Please remember to put your phone in silent or plane mode. So before we get into the heart of the matter for these last exchanges, the last topic we will deal with are the new digital practices post-COVID crisis. And we will invite the Director General in charge of data and digital, Yves Tirode, together with a former Vice President of Apple, Jean-Louis Gasset, to come to the floor. Good evening, gentlemen, and thanks for joining us. Please be seated. We are talking about new digital practices post-COVID. So are there new practices after COVID? Is there an intensification of practices? Could we give a state of play? Perhaps, Yves Tirode, you would like to start introducing this subject. Good afternoon, everyone. Myself and Jean-Louis tried to prepare our speech, and then we thought it might be interesting to talk about what happened, well, I'm not going to say post-COVID, but after the first lockdown, and to see how that played out for customers, for collaborators within companies, and what that meant in terms of innovation for the years to come. So that was the brief we'd given ourselves. Well, this is a very important issue. In the Valley, I could see what was happening in businesses such as Apple and Facebook and Amazon, because Amazon has quite a strong presence in the Valley. One of our children works with Google, so I saw that from the inside. I have friends at Apple as well. So the changes were really quite interesting to observe. One of our children, for example, organized the distribution of 200,000 Chromebooks to subcontractors, to Google subcontractors. So it all had an important impact on working practices, which changed and which will probably never be the same again. Another point which I think we should share with you is what have we done for popular banks and savings banks? What's the impact of what's happened over the past 18 months? So just a few figures. We looked at how things were before and how they are after, sort of before and after. So for online banking, before the first lockdown, we had 6 million customers connecting to our websites and applications per month. And now it's 10 million. So over the course of 18 months, we've gone from 6 million to 10 million customers, French customers, connecting to Banque Populaire and Caisse d'Épargne applications, a very short period of time. If we hadn't had COVID and the need for people to use digital tools, this would probably have happened over 4 or 5 times longer period. And the other point I think is worth looking into for yourselves and for your customer, because you might be experiencing the same things, is that this has mostly happened with mobiles. Before the first lockdown, the share of mobile was 40% of connections, and now it's 60%. So we've had an acceleration of speeding up At BPCE, we've really hedged our bets on mobiles. For day-to-day banking, it really is the most important entry point. Now, is that long-term? Is that sustainable? Because we keep asking ourselves, looking at things and saying, well, things have gone up, services have developed much faster, the sales of mobiles, iPads, Chromebooks, laptops has skyrocketed. There's been supply chain interruptions. So is this going to carry on following the same trend, or is that going to plummet again? I think that what we're experiencing is both massive and sustainable long-term. There are two examples that I think are worth looking at because they're part of everyday life. When you do a bank transfer, when you're entering new beneficiaries for your bank transfers. Now, for the BPCE Groupe, Banque Populaire and Caisse d'Épargne, 99% of new beneficiaries, so that's 7 million people since the beginning of the year, has been done online. 3 years ago, that functionality, adding a beneficiary in our online bank, did not even exist. So typically, this is a use that's no longer physical, it's only online. Now, for bank transfers themselves, our population is not all AB+ or urban geeks. We have people all over France who might be discovering digital tools with the bank. So we have 96% of bank transfers in France that are being done from a digital tool. So I don't think there's any backtracking on that. There's no turning back if you look at these examples. 3 years ago, these things were more the preserve of neobanks, and now it's traditional banks that have developed exactly the same tools that so-called specialized digital banks had come up with. Now, this is a chance for me to say that, well, I'm not a banking professional, as you know. I'm a customer, a fairly ordinary one. And I'd like to say that I find French banks more modern than American ones. It was quite a surprise to find this out. I was lucky enough to be fired successively from 2 French banks because I was American, and that dealing with the bank account of an American citizen in France is quite tricky. But I find that it's much more modern when you have to do a bank transfer in the US. It's much more convoluted than when you do one in France. But anyway, the issue I'd like to raise is work. About work. In companies such as yours or in Silicon Valley, is 3+2 or 2+3, meaning 3 days at work, 2 days working from home, or 2 days working from the office, 3 days at home? Is this going to... This has increased productivity, we have found, which was a surprise, certainly a good one. Is that a long-term trend? I'm being told that working from home is a long-term trend, but if that was the case, I would never have met my wife. So I think that's quite an important question, even though my own personal example is not necessarily well chosen. But is that going to be a long-term trend? The day before yesterday, I met the boss of MasterCard, and he said, so do you work 2 days or 3 days? So the idea is not, do you work remotely? The question is, do you work remotely 3 days or 2 days? I said, well, I have an issue with GAFA, so if I don't give my employees a lot of work from home, they might leave. But the point is, we need tools, we need monitoring. When we were designing this conference, I was asking myself what the before and the after was for BPCE. I think for a lot of your companies, you had exactly the same questions. Before, we were working really hard on using Teams, Zoom or Microsoft, whatever it was. And it was really hard to explain that working collaboratively was really useful. It was hard to explain that to decision makers more than employees. We started out with Natixis, and then we continued doing so within BPCE. But just taking the example of the French retail bank, in December 2019, we'd set up all our systems, and we had 2,000 internal users out of 100,000 employees who were regular users of those Teams, tools, and so on. 1 year later, it was 80,000 out of 100,000 employees. So very similar to customers, really. I think the before and after is quite striking.
You can also ask questions about the very fast adoption that happened with this technology. You need to see how will this be embedded in the processes of the companies. In the end, will this be positive for their efficiency, productivity, or not? The reality is that in a few months there was a change, and I can give this example of BPCE. I saw what happened in the company. So in the future we'll see if the deployment will continue, but the deployment was really fast. Is there a segmentation? What I mean is there, for example, someone working on code who is working on a project, and you can understand, and I can understand very easily that this person working on a project could be almost always at home in his own bubble, working, and be very productive and very happy. And then you have this other example of another team that needs to launch a project, and how does the harmonizing of creativity can happen from home? Does remote working cancel this type of excitement and exchange of ideas, of emotions that really bring forward a project? Or if you do it through Zoom, for example, or through Teams from Microsoft, will it be as good? I'm not sure what you've seen in Silicon Valley, but I can give you our example. When I remember, it was in March. In March 2020, there was these credits that were guaranteed by the state, and the question was, can you do this online or not? Can you ask for it online or not? And we wanted to do it online because even the leadership, we couldn't go to our offices. So I think we were the only ones, at least the first ones, to do electronic signing, electronic contracts, and we did that in 4 weeks. So this type of developments of new projects, and we could do it only remotely. we did manage to do it. And when it comes to updating apps on the phones or for the stores, and also maintenance for security, all of this we did remotely. Also, the test of the applications, all of it was done remotely. We were able to do it. It wasn't easy, but we were able to do it because we didn't have a choice. That was the only way we could do it. But everything where it was necessary to have innovation, to have creativity, honestly, remotely we tried to do it. We tried to do Zoom sessions with people from Silicon Valley. We had a lot of attempts, but it was extremely difficult to do it that way. And our employees, in particular the younger ones, I think they suffered the most from the distance. They were the first one to ask to come back to the office. I think that was very clear. I'm not sure if you see the same thing in your teams, but I think objectively, I'm talking about digital interface there, and it's something that we're doing, and we're trying to have hybrid ways of doing the work, also for development. Yes, I admire what you've done. You were talking about those credits, the PGEs guaranteed by the state, government guaranteed credits. I'm not sure exactly of the right word, but I believe this was truly remarkable. How modern it was compared to what happened in the US. In the US, as you know, there was money sent from the state, $1,000, $1,200 given to different American citizens in order for them to have help during the lockdown. And the implementation of that was completely catastrophic. It was chaos. And that's really where you see that in those areas and sectors where you think that Silicon Valley and the United States are at the top, and then the rest of the world is behind, then you see that when it comes to France, and when it comes to my experience in the Valley, you see that France is really at a good level, and it's satisfying to see that my home and native country is that modern. That's reassuring. Now, regarding the creation and when it comes to projects, I agree with what you said. We need to have new models and to find a new virtual coffee machine, maybe. We need to come back to the coffee machine. I often look at French television from the United States, and I really like France. And I see that this idea of the coffee machine is truly crucial, and I'm very happy about this. There's another topic we haven't talked about, which was very crucial throughout this period, is e-commerce. Maybe we should talk about it for a moment, because we have this purchases and payment activity, and we have a report, and we think that 20% of the market when it comes to flows, and we have a study on 300,000 shops, and we're looking at their trends. And there's something that is quite funny, because I was the boss of e-commerce site, SNCF.com, and I know e-commerce, and what is rather weird, funny, interesting, is that there was no change in the growth of e-commerce. It was 15% a year. It was in the past, and it is the same. It's quite big, 15%. It's 2 percentage points per year. And if you look at all countries, it's the same. Some are forward, the UK, for example. That's really interesting. And this morning, I looked at a number that I didn't know. its use and the impact of a contactless payment when you pay with your card without, so contactless, and there's a very impressive evolution there. If you look at French transactions, it's a number that I didn't know, but it's a new number that I can give you now. In 2019, the share of contactless was 25% of transactions. And post-COVID, post-lockdown, it's 60%. That's a huge change, a huge evolution, forced evolution in a way. And that's a case of use, that's something that people will not go back. They won't go back to the other way of doing things. Everything is contactless, and in contactless, the other question that is asked, so do you do it with your card? And when you pay with your mobile phone, for example, or your watch, it's something that's more marginal. Inside of the 60%, the share of payment with Apple Pay or with other tools, Google Pay, for example, that's only 4%. So that's marginal. But if you look at the before, after, it was multiplied by 3. So there's a very large rise. And it's interesting that you know this, because we have given you a lot of numbers of everything that I see day to day. And if you look at the before, after, it's really striking. And when you have first tried to pay with a watch, you don't want to go back. I married someone that doesn't like new technologies, and she's really reluctant when it comes to using a smartwatch, for example. But when my wife realized that she could pay with her watch everywhere, well, she didn't want to go back. She won't use a credit card anymore in the future. And I must say that when I can arrive in Paris, go to the Café de Flore, and say to the waiter, can you give me the terminal, or can I pay with my watch? When I do this, I don't want to go back, and I think this is a permanent change. It's a true good innovation that facilitates life. It's just a small improvement in your life. It's something that I really like. And during the lockdown, we updated at Natixis more than 400,000 payment terminals. We changed the software, and all of this happened remotely as well. So we continued to work, and the activity continued even for major transformation. All of this is really at the heart of our work. So talking about the Ingenico terminals, I have a little story about it. It's a good story. You know that I like Apple products, but I bought a Microsoft product in Stanford, and when I wanted to pay for it, I saw that there was an Ingenico terminal, and I put my watch close to the terminal, and the employee was very shocked because the transaction worked, because this terminal was updated, had been updated, and it could work with Apple Pay, even for Microsoft. So those were the topics I wanted to talk about. So I see that we don't have much time left, and there was something that we could talk about, maybe. What does it mean? What does it mean for innovation? What will happen now? What is going to happen? So maybe I can start this debate. I'm talking about banking, and there's something that I always find surprising, because I worked for transport, for e-commerce, telecommunications, and when we're looking at the share when you take all the technology investment in the world in 2019-2020, the share of fintech is 20%. That's surprising because it's huge. It's in 2019 that's $170 billion. So what are the innovations? What are the fintechs that will scale up? And this is a question that we asked all the time because there's this big amount and big value, so it's difficult to buy fintechs, and there are a lot of trendy topics, and you should always worry about the trend. Trend is sometimes good, sometimes it's not sustainable. So I think there's two topics that are very interesting today. First, open banking. What is open banking? Well, it's when for value proposals very particular, for example, for buy no better, for example, something that you like, I believe, because I'm a former poor person, this idea of buy no, I'm not so, I don't want to say I'm nouveau riche, but I'm a former poor person. So this idea of buy no, pay later is something that is really surprising. It's something that is exploding in America. It's also the same in France. This idea that you can pay 4 times automatically. For example, when you have an account, it's something that can happen automatically. And I think that this new trend is really surprising, and I hope that it is sustainable. This idea of buy no, pay later, it's something that we're doing with a co-venture with BBS. It's called ONE. And I'm the president of this joint venture. And when you look at, for example, e-commerce, when you have this offer to pay at the end, you can pay right now, or you can pay 3 times in 4 times. And this, when you look at the volume of it for payment at the end of the sales journey, it's 2%. And the consensus today, look, when I was talking about Jean-Pierre Vibouc, they work with a number of big customers, e-commerce sites, but also retailers like Auchan or Decathlon, Leroy Merlin. And they believe that by 2025, the share of buy no, pay later, it can be 3, 4, 60 times, it will be much higher. So multiply by 10 or by 15. So that means that for all vendors, at the end of your purchase, you will always be offered to pay in 3 times, 4 times, 60 times. And so it's something that could represent 20 or 30% of transactions for e-commerce. So this is a trend that we believe will be very important in the future, and it's a global trend. So when you look at the valuation like of Klarna, a firm in America, they're very high because you see that there is this rise of e-commerce 15% every year, and you see that it's time 10 inside of e-commerce. You believe there is a big valuation coming.
Yeah, it's very surprising indeed. And I hate being indebted, so I always make sure that I don't use this type of offer. I'm very reluctant. But is it because of the pandemic that we have seen this new trend, or is it a trend that we would have seen in our society in any way? Well, this is not something I know. Well, in any case, buy now, pay later is a trend that is probably there to stay for the coming years. Another trend, but I'm sure that you can also notice this in many other businesses, and this has to do with the creation of ecosystems around the huge platforms. I consider that BPCE is now a platform. We are a platform. If you take a look at the public of BPCE, our customer base. Well, we have more than 2 billion clicks per year. So it means that we have more clicks than huge websites, and we have very qualified people connecting every day. It means that you have 2 billion connections per day. And the fintechs come and see us and ask us, well, we would like to connect to you. No, in any case, they don't have much of a choice, because if they want to have so much traffic, it would cost them so much that they just want to join us. And this is the reason why we are currently thinking, just like the people in the Valley do, we are thinking of creating our market space. Most of our activities is based on APIs. Why? Because if you're not flexible enough, obviously it won't work. If you look at international transactions, international payments. We are working with a fintech that used to be called TransferWise, and now it's called Wise. This is something the customer won't see. It's transparent for the customer. So we are part of an ecosystem, and I think that this is the future. What do you think? Well, wait and see. Well, honestly, when you're talking about the size and the number of connections on your website every year, every day, those are figures that really make me wonder what the future will be, because we tend to think that the US is a huge market, but well, really the size makes me wonder about the future. But, well, last but not least, I think that the digital trend is currently present on 3 continents. And this is not because of technological constraints. It's not due to consumers' habits. No, I think that what is currently taking place, it has to do with privacy. And it all depends on the continent, because China has another way of thinking about privacy matters. It's not the same in Europe, and it's different again in the US. And I'm convinced that the way you carry out business in China, Europe, or the US will really depend on data regulation. And, well, no need to mention the EU legislation about data. And I think that this is something that is very clear in the projects that the European Commission has, for example. And if I think of American banks or China, I'm part of the International Institute of Finance, and we keep talking about this type of topics. And one of our major topic of discussion is not how we use digital for the data, but how the trend is going to change depending on the country, and what will the GAFAM do depending on the continent. I think that this is indeed an interesting topic, but we probably need to conclude our discussion. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure. Thank you. Thank you so much for giving us some ideas about the time before the COVID-19 crisis and post-COVID, and what you were mentioning, online transactions, home working, e-commerce. Is this something that is now part of our way of consuming? Isn't it part of our habits now? And this is my last question. Well, I think what you were mentioning about, you know, the different ways the continents, the 3 continents, see privacy protection. I think that this is really how the situation is. I come to France very often, and I'm always astonished at the cultural differences. And I think that this is something which is really embedded in the culture, and it is there to last. I think that Europe, I don't know China, so I'll speak about Europe. I think that Europe, in many ways, is more modern than the US. That's at least my opinion. Okay, well, let's conclude on this positive note. Europe being in advance as compared to the US. Thank you very much, Jean-Louis Gasset. Thank you, Yves Tirole.
Mesdames, Messieurs,
Right, ladies and gentlemen, we are now coming almost to the end of our Export Tech Day proposed by Natixis CIB. And to conclude in the best way possible this event, I'm going to call the co-head of Natixis Corporate and Investment Banking, Mrs. Anne-Christine Champion, please.
alors,
Right now, maybe this will surprise you. The jingle has been launched. Anne-Christine Champion is not coming on stage, and rightly slow because Explore Tech has all day been on innovation. And by way of conclusion, Anne-Christine Champion wished to fully innovate, and I'll let you discover right away in images.
Bonjour à toutes et à tous.
Hello, everybody. We are delighted for having welcomed you today to this first edition of Explore Tech of Natixis CIB. Tech is a very big challenge for social and economic development, which touches on all the actors of society. New technologies are a trend, deep trend, challenging the way we function, our environment, starting with our perception of the real. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Welcome Anne-Christine Champion, please.
belle performance.
Quite a performance there, I say. Good evening, everybody. This is my first experience of virtual reality. Amazing, amazing. The first time was a few weeks ago in a virtual reality game with my children, and I encourage you to experience it. So in the real reality, as it were, I wanted to thank you all for your participation in such large numbers today, physically present, in digital presence. And thank you to Cedric O, Laurent Mignon, Nicolas Namias, and all our speakers today, as well as our partners of BCG for having made our day a success. New technologies are a major challenge, changed our ways of functioning. Luc Julien and Véronique Sané spoke about artificial intelligence. Then we spoke about blockchain, virtual reality, augmented reality. And these technologies have benefited, namely recently, from considerable investment, be it from private sector, but also the public sector, which have understood that new technologies, in particular deep tech for breakthrough technologies, was a major driving force for development and growth. And we have seen this in Explore Tech survey that was presented by Thibaut Guyara, Benaya, that a very large number of the companies have invested in deep tech. The pandemic has been an accelerator, and Yves Tirod and Jean-Louis Gasset have discussed this, saying that this acceleration has indeed changed our perception of the digital significantly in our professional lives, in our personal lives. And it touched all the sectors of economy. You've been able to participate in a certain number of roundtables in different sectors, and all these sectors have been impacted. I won't come back to this, on what you were able to hear and see. In some of these roundtables, we were able to hear that if all the sectors have been impacted, for some, deep tech is important in the CSR strategy of the different players. digital transformation accompanies and nourishes environmental change. Natixis CIB is aware of this challenge, and we are investing to roll out and strengthen our expertise, our capacity to understand these challenges and these technical subjects. As a bank, our responsibility is to accompany our clients for this transition and their development. More specifically, we wish to accompany all the clients, be it the actors of tech, startups, growing companies, investment funds, or non-tech partners who are carrying out this transition for their own corporation. And for this, we've identified 3 areas of development for which we've decided to invest. These 3 areas are diversify, commit, and transform. Diversify the products that we propose to our customers, come with innovative new products that will respond to the technological challenges. For example, financing that we put in place for Olam, which is a big trader of the agricultural sector. Classic financing revolving facility, quite standard in nature, but which is indexed on the degree of the advancement of the digitalization of Olam, measured by BCG Acceleration Index. So this kind of product that we've been able to see elsewhere for the environmental transition, indexed onto the maturity of the digitization of the company. And more widely, the products that we propose to our clients, financing to growth companies that require different types of financing that you can have compared to big corporations, and consultancy, raising capital equity for all these subjects. The second area is commitment, committing ourselves to strengthen our understanding and our analysis. We are investing in research teams to understand and analyze these technological challenges. You've seen this with the survey today, the Explotech survey, and adapting our solutions in order to improve our analysis. We are a lender, a financer, and in our credit analysis grid, we've integrated matrices which allow us to measure and identify the impact of technological risk, the degree of maturity of our clients on these subjects. Cedric mentioned this in the introduction. It's a major transition. The previous one saw some actors disappear with winners and losers. As financiers, as lenders, these are major subjects for us and in our capacity to actually accompany our clients. And so it is in the same spirit what we've been able to do with the green weighting factor a few years ago that we created for the environmental transition to measure the advancement and environmental impact on our clients. And then transform our expertise to the benefit of our clients. First is to use all the strengths of BPCE Group, which benefits from an ecosystem which is high performance, to accompany tech players, innovators, rather incubators of BPCE for innovation. Next, Innov for Banque Populaire to accompany actors in French tech, and then tech and data innovation that we make available, or M&A partners, highly specialized, such as Clipperton boutique of M&A specialized in tech. Second thing will be to develop new expertise on subjects such as blockchain and others that will allow us to accompany our clients. Hence, the announcement that we made on the creation of a dedicated hub where we will centralize this expertise and disseminate them within the bank and for all the business lines and platforms that we have. So to conclude, thank you very much to all for this collective success of the first edition of Explore Tech. I hope that I'll have the pleasure of seeing you for the second edition in 2022 and to be able to exchange with you on the future successes in this field. Thank you to all.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Anne-Christine Champion. Indeed, we are coming to the end of this first edition of Explore Tech 2021. First edition, which marks the beginning of collaborative success between all the actors present, you and all of those who are following us remotely. The exchanges, however, are not over, because you're going to be invited now to a cocktail just at the end of this day, just as you leave this big conference room. And in fact, we've seen this with Anne-Christine Champion's avatar. You have the possibility of doing your own avatar with the capsule, Silk capsule available to you outside. Thank you all for being there in this room and remotely. Thank you very much. And I'd like to thank the team that has organized Ellen, Isabelle, Céline. I think we can give them a big hand. Thank you to them, to the technical team as well, headed by Charles-Henri and Tanya. They will also get your applause. And indeed, as Anne-Christine Champion said, we hope to see you in a year's time for the second edition of Explore Tech by Natixis CIB. Thank you to all, and have a wonderful evening.